Hi, I'm EAC Commissioner Don Palmer. As part of the EAC's video series for Women's History Month, I am honored to be joined today by the Secretary of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Secretary Kate Coles-James. Secretary James is a lifetime Virginian and has served the public in a variety of roles at the state, local, and federal levels. Under Presidents Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, she was appointed to the National Commission on Children. She served as Associate Director of the White House Office for the National Drug Control Policy and an Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in the George H.W. Bush administration. Under President George Bush, she served as the Director of the Office of Personnel Management. Earlier this year, she was appointed by Governor Youngkin as Secretary of the Commonwealth. She was also Commissioner and Vice Chair for the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission that helped organize the 100th anniversary of women gaining the right to vote in 2020. She's also served on the Commission for Federal Election Reform in 2005, along with co-chairs former President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James Baker III. Thank you, Secretary James, for joining me today and participating in our Women's History Month series.
Thank you, and thank you for your long service in these very important issues.
Thank you. To begin with, could you tell me a little bit about your career in public service and whether you've had women who've been mentors or role models to you that helped you sort of achieve what you've achieved?
I sure have, and I probably would be remiss if I didn't start with the most important one, who was my mother, who was an incredible woman. She did not have higher education degrees, but her common sense, her grit, her wisdom, and her resilience, I think really helped shape who I am and let me know the possibilities that existed for me. Probably the women who have professionally impacted me the most are women like two Connies played very prominently in my life, Connie Newman and Connie Horner. I looked at both of them as women that I admired, respected. I learned philosophy, ideology, demeanor from them, tenacity. Connie Horner is one that I would look at. She was the deputy secretary at HHS when I was an assistant secretary. Phenomenal thinker. And Connie Newman helped guide me strategically, thinking through my career decisions, and I watched how she was a bridge builder and wanted to model my life after that. So I think those two Connies and my mother, and then multiple others that have come along the way.
Yeah, family is very important, and that relationship with your parents and as a role model. You know, one of the recent most notable anniversary was the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. And as I mentioned earlier, you were a member of the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission. Can you talk about some of that work and the significance of the 19th Amendment? Because that is pretty important.
It is very important. And, you know, one of the things that that excited me about that particular commission and the role that I played in it is that at a time in our country when there was so much vitriol in the public square, when the rhetoric had reached a certain level where you couldn't have a civil conversation, there was this little island of women who came together from across the political spectrum. And we said the one thing that we agreed on, let's focus on what we agree on, keep politics out of it. All of us agreed about the sanctity of the vote, how important it was for women, and how important the 19th Amendment was. And we wanted to celebrate that together. And so in some small way, not only the work that we did on celebrating women's suffrage, but I think we have the opportunity to demonstrate what it looks like when people of goodwill come together for a common cause and a common good. And I made friends across the political spectrum that the relationships have gone on far beyond the Women's Suffrage Commission. And I do think that that is a model that we can hold up and say to the guys, look, when women come together and decide on something, we know how to focus on what we can accomplish, what we can do, and be successful for the common good. So I think the Women's Suffrage Commission demonstrated, one, we could come together around a celebration, but we could also demonstrate what it looks like to work together across party and ideological lines.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I really did get a sense that there really was a celebration during that period of that right to vote for women. And what sort of feedback did you get from the public on that? I mean, I saw it as a very positive centennial celebration. What sort of feedback did you get after it was all said and done and we moved on to 2021 and 2022?
Yeah. You know, we got lots of feedback, and as I'm watching what's going on with the 250 celebration that's coming up for our country, there's a lot they can learn from the Women's Suffrage Commission about how we work together, how we kept the mission front and center. And the feedback that we got from across this country was unbelievable. We got feedback from Republican governors, Democrat governors, mayors from cities, women's group, from Democrat women's group, Republicans women's groups. They were so excited about something that we could coalesce around that was positive and uplifting, and people responded to that. And they were pleased that we could celebrate such an important milestone for women in the history of this nation and in women's history.
Outstanding. 2022 marks the 20th anniversary of the signing of the Help America Vote Act and the creation of the Election Assistance Commission. Notably, that's the first time I sort of recognized you and at least got to know you from a public perspective. And you served as a member of that commission on the federal election reform, and commonly referred to as the Carter-Baker Commission. In reading that report today, I was struck by how many times the EAC was noted, which is a bipartisan commission, as a potential solution for problems, both current and in future. For example, there were recommendations on ways to support the states in complying with federal law, recommendations how the federal government can support the states in election administration. What do you think about the commission's on a federal election reform recommendations 20 years later? And what do you see about those recommendations where we are today in election administration?
You know, recently I pulled that report up online and read through the recommendations again. And I found myself throwing pens and pencils at the screen and saying, you should have listened to us. Again, that was a commission that was made up of thoughtful people from across the political spectrum who had a desire to make recommendations that would be helpful to bring integrity to the electoral process. And I found that so many of the recommendations that we made way back then that we could reach consensus around, we could reach agreement around, are things that today are considered outside the mainstream. Things that we came together on then that today are labeled as racist or suppressing the vote, or so it just said to me that in the abstract, these were great ideas, they were great suggestions, but somehow the climate in the country changed, and the very suggestions that we made more than 20 years ago are not now viewed as helpful and mainstream. And over the years, I've become a little cynical about boards and commissions, because you do the hard work. You sit across the table, you debate, you negotiate, you read, you analyze, and you come up with what you hope is great policy. And what you don't want to see happen is that all of that hard work then goes into recommendations that are bound in some sort of a document and then placed on a shelf to gather dust. So you are hopeful that those recommendations would actually be looked at and enacted.
Well, Secretary James, if it's any solace, I will tell you that over the years, I have always pulled that out and looked at those recommendations, and perhaps technology has changed. Obviously, it's been 20 years, but I always look for ways that those recommendations can be placed today, because I think that the fact that it was a bipartisan commission, it gives the imprint of having both sides of the aisle look at the issue, and things may be slightly different today, but the underlying fundamental recommendations I think hold true. And so you should take solace in the fact that people that are in this business, election administration, we continue to look at those. Just like I worked at the Bipartisan Policy Center, and we had the PCA, the Presidential Commission on Election Administration, and there were some good recommendations there too.
Yes.
But there's going to be differences of opinion, but I do think that serves as the foundation for folks in election administration to try to improve the process. So
well, thank you for that, because and this is what I had to make my peace with. And that is that when you take these commissions out of the political arena and away from the politicians, and you get thoughtful people who genuinely want to solve problems in a room, you can almost always come to consensus. Bipartisan groups of non-politicians who genuinely want to solve problems. I've come up with new language, by the way, Don. I say, you know, when you come together to solve problems, I want to put labels aside. Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, and let's come up with a whole new cadre of people that I call solutionists. Do you really want to fix this? Do you really want to solve this problem? So let's take those people out of the equation, bring together solutionists from both parties, from both political spectrums, from all ideologies, but you must be a solutionist. You can't be someone that just wants to win political points. You've got to be someone who genuinely wants to solve the problem. And I think when you get a cadre of solutionists together, you can come up with great ideas for how to fix things.
That's outstanding. I'm going to incorporate that into my terminology. I appreciate it. Even though the Secretary of the Commonwealth isn't directly involved in election administration, you are a key advisor to the governor. As you look forward to the midterm elections, what are some of the things that the public should know about election administration in Virginia at the local level?
Well, I think that is an important question, and clearly I have thought a lot about this. Where I am on this, Don, is I have said to the governor, and in casual meetings that I've had with members of the cabinet and with the individuals who are involved in the election administration process here in Virginia, it is important, it is imperative that everyone who casts a vote feels in their soul that their vote is going to be counted, that their vote is significant and means something. To me, the right to vote and the individual vote is one of the most sacred pieces of our democracy. And so when we come together to figure out how to bring integrity to the process, how to bring back a sense of confidence to the electoral process, it is imperative that people who are both Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, independents, non-partisan people, non-ideological people, feel that election integrity matters. And so I think that when we approach these issues, we've got to stop questioning people's character, their integrity, their motives, and say, can we bring people of goodwill together who really want election integrity and to know that we want to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. Who cannot coalesce around that? And have people have a sense of when I cast my vote, I A, know it's going to be counted, and B, know that it's not going to be offset by fraud or abuse. That's it. We all can coalesce around that. And that shouldn't be a party issue. It shouldn't be an ideological issue. We shouldn't question each other's character and integrity when we say we want election integrity.
I couldn't agree more. And that's why the Election Assistance Commission is here to be a partner with Virginia and will continue to be a partner with Virginia. Let me shift gears a little bit back to Women's History Month. What advice as a woman in public service do you have for other women who may be interested in a career in public service? And you've had a long career in public service.
You know, that's an interesting question. And for people who don't know my story, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom who, you know, the most difficult decision or controversial decision I made on any given day was standing in front of the refrigerator and trying to figure out chicken or hamburger for dinner. And I say to women all the time, do not underestimate your voice and what you have to offer, and that your voice can make a significant difference. We as women care deeply about our families, about our communities, about our country. We have a voice and we have skills. So my advice is step into it, step into the moment. There's so many opportunities for us to feel that our voices don't matter. If I give the time to go to a political meeting or a rally or a school board meeting or go to a demonstration, what difference does it make? And it makes a world of difference. But many of us have to go the second step, not just show up there, but then to say, I would be willing to serve. And I tell women all the time, if you can, you have skills you don't even know you have. If you can manage, you are the COOs of some of the most important corporations in our countries called families. You are the chief operating officers there. You are highly educated, you have skills, you can run things, you can do things, so get into the arena. I think many women have made that step and recognize that, but there's this whole group of women who have self-doubt, and those are the stay-at-home moms or those who are working in the community or dropped out of the workforce right now, and I'm encouraging them to come back and come back strong. All of those voices need to be heard.
I think in reading your bio, one of the first things you did was get involved with the school board and in the schools, and then you sort of launched your career.
My first entry was school board, serving on the Fairfax County School Board, and then eventually the State Board of Education, because education was important to me. I think every child in America deserves to have someone who's crazy about them and will advocate on their behalf. My children and my grandchildren have a crazy mom and a crazy grandmother who's going to be there. But then I wanted to advocate on behalf of those kids who didn't have someone who was crazy about them and would speak up, to be sure that the education gaps were closed, that they got the best quality education possible, and that someone was going to speak up on their behalf. My kids are going to be taken care of. My grandkids are, because they got a crazy mother and grandmother who's crazy about them. But I wanted to be crazy for the other kids as well.
Madam Secretary, thank you so much for participating in this series, and best of luck on your new important role for the citizens of Virginia. And thank you so much for doing this interview for Women's History Month.
Thank you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you, a fellow Virginian.
Thank you.
Thank you.